Before you speak, the room has already decided what you are. Not good, not generous, not noble, usable. The sentence is passed in silence. You enter a meeting, wait for the right moment, begin your point, and someone cuts across you without apology. Nobody flinches, nobody corrects the interruption. The discussion simply continues, as if your voice was never part of the structure. You think this happened because they were impatient. That is not the reason. Something more decisive was recognized before the first sentence left your mouth. Later, someone leans on your desk, half smiling, and says, "You're the only one I can rely on." It sounds like trust. It sounds almost like rank, but listen carefully to what is hidden inside it. They do not bring weight to the man they fear losing. They bring weight to the man trained to carry it without changing expression. So you nod. You absorb the extra work. You confuse being chosen with being valued. Those are not the same thing. In politics, the animal selected for burden is not honored. It is merely convenient. At dinner, a friend makes a joke at your expense, small enough to dismiss, sharp enough to establish position. You laugh with everyone else, just a second too late, just loudly enough to prove there is no threat in you. The table relaxes. That relaxation should disturb you. Men do not relax around power. They relax around permission. And you've been granting permission for longer than you realize. Watch what happens to the difficult man. He speaks abruptly, leaves messages unanswered, says no without embroidery, and still the room adjusts around him. His lateness is interpreted as importance. His sharpness is called standards. His refusal creates calculation. People measure their words around him because he has made consequence visible. You, meanwhile, answer quickly, soften every edge, and keep the air comfortable. You call this restraint. They call it safety. Safety has its place, but never at the center of power. This is the part you misread. You thought niceness would be decoded as virtue. It is decoded as low-risk submission, not consciously, instinctively. The one who absorbs friction is assigned more friction. The one who avoids imposing cost is given the bill. In a meeting, your idea is ignored, then repeated by a harder voice 5 minutes later and accepted at once. You notice the theft. You still say nothing, and in that silence, a deeper verdict is entered. Whether this was built by morality, fear, or training does not matter now. Others are no longer asking why you do it. They are simply using it. Because in every room, value is measured politically. Who sets tempo? Who shapes tone? Who creates hesitation? Who can be burdened without resistance? And without ever announcing it, you have already been placed among the men who can be consumed. In the presentation, you lay out the idea clearly, almost too clearly. You make it easy to understand. Then a colleague cuts in, sharpens the wording, lowers the tone, and says the same thing with more force. Heads turn toward him. The slide has not changed. The thought has not changed. Only the political weight changed. You feel the theft immediately, then doubt yourself for noticing. That hesitation is part of the mechanism. By the time you decide it mattered, the room has already assigned ownership. An hour before deadline, another request lands on you, not because you are the best choice, because you are the least dangerous place to drop pressure. They know you will not force a scene. You will stay late, fix the mess, send the clean version, and call it professionalism. But institutions do not reward the removal of friction the way you think they do. They build on it. Quiet competence becomes expected flaw, not visible power. The more reliably you absorb disorder, the more natural it feels to bury you under it. Then comes the praise. Reliable, steady, great to work with. A manager says it in front of others as if recognition has finally arrived. For a moment, there is relief. Then promotion goes to the man who pushed back in meetings, protected his time, and made his ambition expensive to ignore. That is the part you were not supposed to notice. The system thanks one man for carrying weight and elevates another for controlling perception. One becomes infrastructure, the other becomes advancement. So the pattern hardens. When something unpleasant appears, you are included. When visibility appears, you are forgotten. When cleanup is needed, your name enters the conversation immediately. When leverage is distributed, it happens elsewhere. Behind a tone you are never allowed to disturb. You keep thinking cooperation will eventually be read as leadership. It will not. Once they classify you as cooperative, they translate it into non-threatening. Once you are non-threatening, every future act is interpreted through that label before you even make it. Maybe you catch it in the moment, maybe only later, walking home, replaying the room after it is already closed around someone else. It makes no difference. By then, the hierarchy is no longer being formed. It is being confirmed. You answer immediately, not because the moment requires it, but because you do. The message appears, and you move toward it as if delay might damage something delicate. Then, her reply comes hours later, casual, unhurried, almost detached. You tell yourself she is busy. Maybe she is, but the imbalance began before the excuse. One of you is managing uncertainty, the other is submitting to it. That difference is felt long before it is spoken. She tells you things she does not tell other men. The frustration, the confusion, the private disappointments. You stay measured, available, easy to reach. You say the right thing at the right time. Your attention becomes a place where she can empty weight without cost. You mistake access for desire because the tone is intimate, but intimacy is not rank. A man can be admitted into emotional space for the same reason he is denied erotic tension. He is safe to use and unlikely to punish distance. Plans with you are always soft around the edges. Maybe tonight. Let's see, I'll let you know you accept the looseness because tightening it would feel too demanding. Then the evening shifts, and suddenly she is somewhere else, with someone else, drawn by a sharper gravity that required no reassurance at all. Later, she returns with warmth just strong enough to keep the channel open. That warmth is not commitment, it is maintenance. And you accept it because some part of you is still calling ambiguity a chance. Then watch how quickly the atmosphere changes when a harder man enters it. He teases, he withholds. He risks slight disapproval and survives it. In seconds, the energy becomes charged, unstable, attentive. You feel it, even if no one names it. He is not more caring. He is simply less governed by the fear of displeasing. That is what reorganizes the exchange. The one who can withdraw without panic controls the frame. The one who explains, adjusts, and waits for clarity has already stepped beneath it. So you give reassurance, time, patience, and interpretive labor. In return, you receive delay, selective warmth, sudden coldness, then brief returns of attention that keep you from leaving cleanly. And the most humiliating part is not rejection. It is classification. You are not being refused because you are too good. You are being sorted into a political category that can receive confession, favors, boredom, and contingency without consequence. Maybe there was attraction once. Maybe there never was. Maybe you were useful from the beginning as audience therapist, reserve option, or contrast against the men she actually feared losing. You do not know. By the time that question forms clearly, the arrangement has already named you. The invitation comes late, almost as an afterthought. Plans were already forming somewhere else, in another chat, in another room, under another tone. Your name enters when logistics appear. Suddenly there is space for you after all. Someone needs a ride. Someone needs another body at the table. Someone says, "Come through," as if the delay means nothing. You accept quickly to prove you are easy. That is the mistake. Late inclusion does not mean belonging. It often means utility discovered just in time. By now your role is so settled it no longer needs discussion. You drive because you always do. You help move the furniture, cover the bill until tomorrow, stay behind when something messy remains. Nobody announces this arrangement. That is what makes it stable. The servant class inside a group is never formally assigned. It is revealed through repetition. The man who absorbs inconvenience without changing the atmosphere becomes the natural site of future inconvenience. Then the banter begins, a joke about your habits, a private detail turned outward just enough to get a laugh. not brutal, not open enough to justify confrontation, only precise enough to test what you will tolerate. You smile with them. You pretend the sting is smaller than it is. That performance purchases a few more hours of access. But it also teaches them something. Every insult you swallow becomes permission stored for later use. You notice another pattern too late. People tell you things because you are discreet. You keep their secrets, protect their weak moments, never weaponize what you know. You think that earns silent credit. It does not. Discretion without consequence is simply safety. Safety invites confession, but not respect. The information flows toward you because you are unlikely to strike back with it. Again, what feels like trust is often just low-risk exposure. And when you finally voice a preference, the air changes. A brief silence, a glance. The decision was already made elsewhere and is now delivered casually, as if your objection arrived after reality had closed. That is how hierarchy survives in private circles, not through formal commands. Through memory, habit, and opportunism. One friend inconveniences you to test the edge. Another mocks you lightly to measure resistance. You preserve the bond by pretending not to notice the measurement taking place. So the humiliation stays small. No open rupture. No scene dramatic enough to justify departure. Only accumulated reductions, forgotten invitations, expected favors, casual ridicule, each one minor enough to survive. Together they become structure. Familiarity does not erase rank. It hardens it, because everyone already knows who will protest and who will adapt. Maybe they still value you. Maybe they only value how predictable, available, and non-retaliatory you have made yourself. The difference grows harder to see each time you choose inclusion over dignity. And they can feel that choice before you make it, so you notice the pattern. Not fully, but enough to become dangerous to yourself. You reply later on purpose. You let the message sit there while you watch the screen and rehearse indifference. For the first time, delay feels like power. You say no to a small request and feel a private rush, as if the structure is shifted because your mouth finally formed resistance. You dress sharper, your texts become shorter. You disappear for a week so your absence can speak where your presence never did. And for a moment, the illusion works on you. You begin narrating a new identity internally. Fewer words, less warmth, more control. You rehearse detached lines in advance, preparing them like weapons for situations that used to catch you open. You imagine that image correction can repair political damage, that if the posture changes, the sentence will be revised. But reputation is not built from one colder reply or one withheld evening. It is built from repeated evidence, and the evidence others remember is older than your performance. They notice the change, of course, but notice is not respect. Someone asks if you are in a mood. Another laughs and says, "You've become mysterious now." The tone is light, but the verdict is hidden inside it. They do not experience your new restraint as force. They experience it as irregularity, resentment, imitation, a costume worn over a body they already understand. You wanted your silence to create tension. Instead, it creates commentary. Then the tests return almost immediately. Another interruption in a meeting, another last-minute favor dropped into your lap, another vague invitation sent late, casual enough to deny insult. This is the moment that matters, though not for the reason you think. Social order is never changed by what you feel privately. It changes when another person encounters cost. And when the familiar pressure appears, your hesitation arrives with it. A pause, too long. An explanation, too careful. A smile added where none was needed. The old structure shows through the new clothing. That is when the false relief collapses. Your slower replies are routed around. Your distance is absorbed without panic. The room does not tremble because you became slightly colder. It adjusts and keeps moving. People who once used your availability now simply call it inconsistency when it disappears. People who interrupted you before do it again, almost experimentally, to see whether anything beneath the surface has hardened. And when nothing immediate happens, the answer is received. You thought distance alone might alter rank, but withdrawal without consequence is just absence. Style without force is decoration. Refusal performed once is an incident, not a new political fact. The first classification remains in place, quietly organizing every new gesture against the memory of what you have always allowed. So now a more disturbing question begins to form. Not whether you can mimic hardness for a week or draft colder sentences in your head, but whether the original sentence passed on you has already settled deeper than you imagine. Whether men and women alike can smell the old permission underneath the new mask. Whether first classifications harden faster than your will to escape them. Then time begins doing the work for them. What looked temporary becomes historical. A year passes, then another, and your name starts arriving before you do. Dependable, easy to work with, solid. The language sounds clean until you hear what is missing from it. No one says formidable. No one says dangerous. No one lowers their voice when speaking about you. They remember your usefulness with perfect clarity and your force not at all. At work, younger men with less skill begin receiving a different kind of treatment, not admiration necessarily. Caution. Their edges are accounted for. Their moods are managed. Their preferences alter plans. You watch people negotiate with them in ways nobody has ever negotiated with you. That is the strategic cost of your history. Once a man is habitually consumed, the environment stops bargaining. It no longer approaches him as a will to be managed. It approaches him as stable material. Outside work, the pattern keeps its shape. You become the emotional backup contact, the late-night message, the safe number dialed after disappointment elsewhere. You are remembered when someone needs containment, not when desire sharpens or status gathers. In friendships, your presence is assumed and your absence barely mythologized. In rooms where others carry complexity, contradiction, even menace, you are flattened into function. The one who helps, the one who understands, the one who can be counted on without ever needing to be counted with. And this is where repetition turns fatal, not because each insult is catastrophic, but because accumulation becomes identity. Missed promotions, stalled attraction, one-sided loyalties, resentment that never leaves your body because it never becomes public consequence. You imagine confrontations in private with almost theatrical precision, the sentence you should have said, the look you should have held, the moment you should have refused. But fantasy does not alter record. The social file keeps updating without your objections. Meanwhile, the dominant personalities acquire something close to myth. Their roughness becomes texture. Their contradictions become depth. Their appetite for power is treated as realism, even when it is ugly. You are granted no such complexity. Submission makes a man legible in the simplest possible way. Others speak of you as if you have no hunger beneath the role, no concealed ambition, no private cruelty, no political instinct. Just function, just service, just the familiar machinery of accommodation. That is the real danger now. Not another interruption, not another favor request. Something colder, historical fixation. Everyone around you already has a completed file on who you are, what you will tolerate, how far you can be pressed, and how little retaliation will follow. They no longer test you with much curiosity because the dataset feels closed. So the question is no longer whether people sometimes mistreat you. It is whether your personality is still visible at all, beneath the role they have been training you to perform for years. By now the pattern should be impossible to isolate, yet you still try. You tell yourself work is political, dating is chaotic, friendships are casual, timing was bad, people were immature, the room was wrong. But the same sentence keeps arriving in different clothing. Your boss calls you reliable, a woman calls you sweet, a friend says don't be so serious after crossing a line he would never cross with someone else. Different settings, same classification, not admired, not feared, managed, Look at the sequence without protecting yourself from it. In one room, you prepare the presentation and someone else receives the promotion announcement you helped make possible. In another, your message sits unread while your availability is still assumed, as if your labor can wait in one category while your uncertainty waits in another. Then a photo appears from a night you were never invited to, faces relaxed around the same people who call when they need something moved, covered, explained, softened, repaired. You keep treating these as separate injuries because that lets you blame chance. They are not separate. They are coordinated outcomes of one readable posture. That is why interruption, delay, teasing, extraction, exclusion, and credit theft begin to feel strangely similar. They are not random techniques. They are expressions of one continuous verdict. The social world has learned that you absorb pressure more often than you redirect it, so pressure keeps choosing you. Not because every person around you is exceptionally cruel, but because your pattern lowers the cost of using you. Once enough people discover the same thing independently, it stops looking like bad luck and starts looking like disclosure. And power does not only belong to the one who attacks, it belongs to the one who defines whether an attack even occurred. This is where you lose twice. First in treatment, then in interpretation. When you object too late and the group laughs, the laughter does more than dismiss your protest. It reframes reality. Now your wound becomes oversensitivity. Your exclusion becomes an oversight. Your humiliation becomes banter. Your stolen credit becomes collaboration. Your burial under the words, "You're such a good guy," is spoken like praise, so you are forced to stand inside the insult and nod as if it honored you. That is full submission in political form. Not merely being used, but being denied the authority to name what is happening while it is done to you. Everyone around you may already share the same conclusion silently: useful, safe, compliant, non-retaliatory. A completed file passed hand to hand without words. So the suffocating truth is not that this happened in one office or with one woman or inside one circle of friends. It is that the same signal keeps broadcasting from you into every hierarchy you enter, and each hierarchy reads it fluently. The rune changes, the verdict does not. And now, the final fear appears. Not whether you can see the pattern, but whether a reputation built through repetition can ever truly be erased, or whether the social world remembers only force and the consequences attached crossing it. So return to the beginning and strip the lie clean. Niceness was never your moral advantage. It was evidence. Visible evidence that you feared the cost of disapproval more than other people feared the cost of using you. That is why the smile kept appearing after the insult, why no problem kept leaving your mouth after exploitation, why the unread message remained unanswered while your help was still assumed, why loyalty went unpaid and the room still felt entitled to your access even as it moved on without you. You thought respect had been delayed, misunderstood, accidentally withheld. It was not. It flowed elsewhere with precision, toward men who made reduction expensive, toward men whose edges were politically legible, not always louder, not always crueler, just clearer in one decisive way. Other people could imagine consequences attached crossing them. With you, those consequences kept dissolving before they formed. That is the final structure. The dominant do not always overpower. Often they are simply easier to read as force, and the submissive do not always kneel visibly. Often they cooperate in their own reduction by becoming consequence-free, by softening every refusal, by explaining every boundary, by laughing 1 second too late, by keeping the bridge open after being pushed from it. So now every interaction begins from an archive already written, not from your intentions, not from your private pain, from the social record of what you have permitted. The file opens before you speak, agreeable, safe, absorbent, territory, and that may be the hardest recognition of all. That being nice was never interpreted as hidden strength. It may have been the socially elegant name for surrender.